in 1965, a book was published outlining the research and discoveries related to the history of our planet and humanity. If simply reading a synopsis of the topics within, one might assume Chan Thomas's book was full of conspiratorial nonsense and fabrications. However, some of his claims are backed by verifiable and calculated data. These claims generated enough attention to intrigue the CIA, and in 2013, the book was declassified by a Freedom of Information Act request. However, a portion of the book remains classified, with full pages missing. But the information we do have access to has built a foundation for modern geologists, journalists, and historians to continue Thomas's research. Although some disagree with the book's claims, if correct, humanity could once again be on the verge of a cataclysmic event we cannot even begin to comprehend. These are some of the most intriguing details surrounding the Adam and Eve story. Before getting into the claims themselves, it's important to ask, who exactly is Chan Thomas? Mr. Thomas attended Dartmouth College and Columbia University and graduated with an electrical engineering degree in 1943. He began research on the cataclysmic phenomenon in 1949, captivated by the wonder and marvel of stories pertaining to the old gods and ancient civilizations. This sense of wonder drove him to discover the works of J-André Deluche in 1779 and George J. Cuvier in 1812. Other notable men of science who believed the planet was ravaged by sudden revolutions of the Earth include the famous mineralogist Dolomieu, Swiss geologists Escher and Forel, and the German geologist von Buch. From his research, Mr. Thomas was able to apply his findings to the possibility of earthquake prediction and issued the results of his studies in November of 1959. He then accurately predicted the months, years, and locations of the major African and Chilean earthquakes of 1960, the Iranian earthquake of 1962, and the Yugoslavian earthquake of 1963. Mr. Thomas was regarded as a man well-versed in multiple disciplines within the scientific community, which included stratigraphy, vertebrate paleontology, radiology, oceanography, glaciology, seismology, paleophytology, earth magnetism, and anthropology. Now, with introductions out of the way, we can move on to our next topic. How would these cataclysms have occurred? The image on screen comes straight from Thomas's book. He references this image to show the reader the cross-section of Earth. Thomas states the two molten layers of our planet are liquid. However, the inner magnetic and electrical structure of Earth makes these layers act as if they were near solid or plastic. From his research, Thomas surmised that every few thousand years the magnetic and electrical orderliness of Earth is disrupted. This causes the poles to shift, allowing the molten layers within the planet to liquefy and the location of the poles to change. He estimated this locational shift takes anywhere from a quarter to half a day before the poles reach the equator. However, the speed of Earth's rotation creates winds of 1,000 miles an hour. Since we are rotating with the planet, we cannot feel the effects of such intense winds. But if such a sudden change were to occur, the effects would indeed be cataclysmic. Thomas acknowledges that there needed to be a specific trigger for this event to occur, making it very clear that said trigger was not of supernatural origin, but of something natural, something part of nature. Originally, he believed sunspots were the cause, but he goes on to say this is incorrect. Although this version of the book does not reveal specifics, Thomas claims every few thousand years neutral matter escapes from the inner core to the outer core, and there is a literal atomic explosion within the Earth. This internal explosion is responsible for the pole shifts, instantly freezing tropical parts of the world, creating sweltering deserts in previously frigid tundras, generating enormous floods reaching far inland, and producing tremendous earthquakes that cover the planet's surface in magma. Although now regarded as legend and myth, Thomas claims information on Earth's history can be obtained by studying both the geographic evidence and the stories of ancient civilizations. While his book presents a list of over 30 examples, I will select a few I thought were interesting. The Berezovsky mammoth frozen in mud, with buttercups still in his mouth, indicating flash freezing. The geological dating in the Murrumbidgee River Basin system in Australia, showing the end of an ice cap there approximately 11,500 years ago. The sudden 200-foot rise of the oceans all over the world 6,000 to 7,000 years ago, possibly corroborating the story of Noah's flood. The Piri-Reis map, showing the North Pole in the Sudan Basin. This map was reportedly created circa 1500, but was a culmination of over 20 other pieces of source material. Experts from the United States Navy Hydrographic Office claimed both Piri-Reis and Columbus had these reference maps, which dated back 5,000 years. Legends from ancient Mayan, Peruvian, Sumatran, and Malayan people regarding the long night, the day the sun stood still, or the day the sun set in the wrong direction. And finally, the existence of a coral reef on the floor of the Arctic Ocean. Again, this is only a handful of the evidence he provides. I implore you to conduct your own research into these claims, as they are extremely intriguing for both a skeptic and believer. In his book, Thomas mentions that a friend suggested the story of Genesis is almost a perfect description of conditions on our planet immediately following a cataclysm. He goes on to state that one of the most predominant theories, and one that he subscribes to, is that Moses was the originator of the creation story, Genesis. Thomas claims this theory is not far-fetched, seeing as how Moses was educated in the Egyptian traditions, in a royal household, and likely had access to many religious writings and teachings now lost with the passing of Alexandria, Heliopolis, and Sais. Furthermore, Thomas's research pointed to the Ten Commandments being a condensed version of the 42 questions of Osiris for entering heaven. Ultimately, if Moses was the originator and author of the Ten Commandments, then he must have had access to Naga tablet writings, or the Egyptians' interpretation of them. Although he does not go into specifics, Thomas conveys that the Naga were an ancient people, predating the Egyptians, and were have thought to share information with them. The priests of Egypt supposedly told the Athenian statesman Solon of the cataclysmic events of 11,500 years ago. Solon was told this while visiting Egypt in 600 BC. The Egyptian priests conveyed the events of 9,000 years before that time, which buried Atlantis beneath the ocean. This story eventually made its way to Plato and has been quoted as evidence regarding the existence of Atlantis. Note that 9,000 plus 600 BC plus 2023 AD equals roughly 11,600 years ago. This is one of the time frames in which modern geologists and archaeologists believe a cataclysmic event occurred. So, was the book of Genesis based on information predating modern man, passed down by an ancient people? This theory may not be too far-fetched once we begin unraveling the Naga, their language, and the story of Genesis itself. In the previous century, I briefly mentioned the existence of the Naga language and how the Egyptians had access to ancient Naga tablets. To build upon that, we must revisit the story of Moses. The language of the Naga used pictures instead of words and was the predominant language in the Eastern Hemisphere 11,500 years ago. Now for the translation piece. Without knowing the language of the Naga, Moses and his brother Aaron would have had to translate the glyphs quite literally. This would have occurred around 1300 BC. Fast forward to 586 BC, after the priesthood was handed down generation to generation, and you arrive at the sacking of Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar. After this, it is reported that Ezra, the son of Suriah, was made captive in Persia. In 458 BC, during the 7th year of Artaxerxes I's reign in Persia, Ezra was commissioned to re-establish the Hebrew religion. Immediately, anyone would be skeptical of this drastic span of time. After all, it would mean Ezra would be over 100 years old. But specific pieces of text exist, which confirm these dates and solidify 458 BC as the end of Ezra's priesthood. Due to this drastic span of time, and taking into consideration the average lifespan during this era, Thomas believes it was Ezra's grandfather Azariah, rather than his father Suriah, who was taken and executed by Nebuchadnezzar. This timeline would indicate that the Adam and Eve story, originally translated by Moses, which in turn was rewritten from memory by Ezra and his scribes, is one from ancient times. After all, we are talking 17 to 20 generations passing since Moses' creation story to Ezra and his scribes. This immense gap in time, coupled with the passing of the story verbally, makes Thomas believe the translation was incorrect. The story of creation was interpreted slightly differently each time and finally ending with what we currently have in Genesis today. Thomas clarifies by stating the significant nagaglyphs given to us by Ezra through Moses are cherubims, man, fruit, rib, woman, serpent, Adam's sleep, tree, and flaming sword. Considering the period Ezra resided in, it makes sense that his translation of Genesis reflects the social and religious attitudes of that time, specifically those regarding women as lowly creatures and being the cause of man's downfall. Knowing what we know today, the translation would read quite differently. In the Bible, the serpent represents the devil, the tree represents life, the fruit represents original sin, cherubims represent angelic beings, and the flaming sword represents the weapon of the cherubim. However, the nagaglyphs tell a different story. In their version, the serpent represented water, or the ocean. The serpent trapped about the tree signified that the mother continent was surrounded by water. Genesis 3 describes Eve's heel on the serpent's head, signifying victory over the oceans. Cherubims were the glyphs for legs, or foundations. The flaming sword symbolized fire and earthquake, signifying what the legends of the cataclysms call earth fire, which is the molten layer 60 miles below, breaking through the Earth's surface. Thomas believes this may be the origin of man's concept of hell. Now, back to the tree. The fruit growing on the tree, or mother continent, symbolized the original mankind which settled the land ages before Adam and Eve. Their eating of the fruit suggests they were descendants from this original mankind and mother continent. Thomas provides additional examples regarding the symbology of the nagaglyphs, specifically the glyph of creation. If you would like additional information, you should read pages 26 and 27 of Thomas's book. So, those were only some of the discoveries claimed by Thomas as a result of his research. Regardless of if you believe or not, the information he claims within his work has captivated the minds of both skeptics and believers. If he is correct, one can only hope humanity is prepared for a cataclysmic event the likes of which we have never seen. If it turns out that this is the ramblings of a deranged researcher, then I guess we have nothing to worry about. Either way, just think about it.